Ark Raiders has one of the most quietly loaded game worlds I have ever spent time digging through, and after months of cataloguing, cross-referencing, and losing sleep over details most players walk right past, I put together this collection of 777 weird, overlooked, and genuinely strange Easter eggs hidden across every corner of the game. Before I move forward, I'm counting on you to support my channel by clicking that tiny subscribe button so that we can spread these amazing videos to folks like you around the world. Thank you. I want to be upfront about how this video was made. I play Ark Raiders a lot, more than I probably should. Over time, I started noticing things that did not quite fit. A poster with a name that appeared twice in different zones, a radio frequency that matched a number on a piece of scrap metal 3 maps away, a shadow that moved slightly differently than all the others. I started writing these things down. Eventually, the list was too long to ignore, and I made this video. When it came time to organize everything, I chose to group the eggs by theme rather than by map location, because so many of them feel like they're in conversation with each other. A few I deliberately saved for the final chapters, because their context only makes sense after you have heard the earlier ones. Some details I left out entirely because they are too speculative to present fairly. What is here feels like the most honest version of what I found. Chapter 1. The environment tells you everything. The first thing worth noting is how Ark Raiders handles environmental storytelling. This is a game that seems to trust that most players will not look closely, and for those who do, it rewards that attention in ways that feel almost private. In the outer industrial zone, there is a collapsed water tower with a hand-painted number on its side. The number is 14. If you cross-reference that number with the service access panels nearby, 14 of them are sealed, not broken, not rusted shut, sealed. The distinction suggests the sealing was deliberate and relatively recent. Just inside the first tunnel that leads underground in the eastern approach, the ceiling has a section of different concrete. It is slightly lighter in color, slightly smoother in texture. The repair is too clean to be emergency patchwork. Something was removed from that ceiling, and the gap was filled in with some care. There is a billboard in the mid-game area that advertises a product called Veltran. The brand name does not appear anywhere else in the game, but the visual design of the logo uses the same typeface as the Ark administrative documents you can find scattered near the relay stations. One possible reading is that Veltran was a corporate affiliate or subsidiary. The third floor of the abandoned housing block has a room that is locked. Every other room on that floor can be opened or bypassed. That one cannot. There is no loot indicator. There is no quest associated with it. There is a small scratch on the door frame at approximately chest height, as if someone tested the frame with a blade before deciding not to proceed. The generator rooms throughout the game almost always have 3 switches. In one specific generator room in the northwest sector, there are 4. The 4th switch is painted over in black. It is connected to wiring that runs behind the wall and disappears. The wiring does not reappear anywhere in the room. Scattered throughout the surface areas, you will find what appear to be ordinary supply crates. Most of them are standard issue, but there is a very small subset of crates that have a secondary serial number stenciled underneath the primary one. These secondary numbers, when written out in sequence based on the order you encounter them along the main route, form a string that matches the combination lock in the Research Annex. The Research Annex combination lock does nothing visible when opened correctly. The door behind it is welded shut, but the act of entering the correct sequence triggers a soft audio cue, a low hum that lasts approximately 2 seconds, that does not occur when you enter incorrect sequences. On the eastern cliffside, there is a series of painted arrows pointing up the slope. Most players follow them toward a loot cache. If you follow them in reverse, going down rather than up, they lead to a small depression in the rocks, with a single spent casing inside. The casing is of a caliber that does not match any weapon available to the player. Inside the medical wing of the main facility, one of the examination tables has restraint straps that are positioned differently from all the others. The others show the restraints laid flat. This one has them hanging off the edge, as if they were released in a hurry rather than unfastened carefully. The cafeteria area has tray slots labeled by zone, apparently for different work crews. Most zones have between 8 and 12 trays. Zone 7 has 2. The label for Zone 7 is also newer than the others, less faded, suggesting it was added after the original installation. In the long corridor connecting the living quarters to the maintenance hall, there is a stretch of floor where the ambient sound changes. The echo shifts slightly. If you stop and listen, the lower frequency of your footsteps sounds hollow. The corridor's map geometry does not show any void beneath that section. One of the ARC terminals you can interact with early in the game has a scrolling status readout. Most of the text is procedurally flavored, but on a cycle that repeats roughly every 4 minutes of real time. A line appears that reads simply, "Query, unresolved." It is the only line that does not fit the operational formatting of the rest of the readout. The outer fence line has breaks in several places where players commonly enter. But there is one section of fence that appears unbroken and intact. If you walk the full perimeter of that section, there is a gap of exactly one fence panel at the back that is missing its top barbed wire. The ground beneath it is slightly compacted, as if something passed through repeatedly. In the vehicle bay, most of the parked machines are in predictable states of disrepair. There is one vehicle that appears fully operational. Its tires are inflated. Its fuel indicator, visible through the window, reads above empty. It simply does not start when you interact with it. The ignition interactable is there. It just does nothing. A corkboard in one of the staff rooms has pinned documents relating to supply schedules behind those documents, visible only if you look from a specific angle that requires crouching near the left edge of the board. There is a smaller piece of paper pinned directly to the cork. It has a single word on it that reads, Thorn. The Thorn note does not connect to any quest, any character name, or any faction identifier that is explicit in the game. But Thorn appears in at least 4 other locations in the game world, as graffiti, as a carved word in a wooden post, as a partial tag on a locker, and as the last 4 letters of a longer word scratched into a wall in the underground section that begins Ha. In the loading dock, there are stacks of shipping containers. Most are labelled with standard freight codes. One of them has a label that begins with the freight code format, but ends with a sequence of letters that spells out a recognizable word when read backward. The word is Echo. The game's ambient lighting in the outdoor zones changes slightly between different times of the in-game day cycle. Most players notice the sunrise and sunset. Fewer notice that at one specific hour of the in-game clock, a shadow cast by the central antenna tower aligns precisely with a marker scratched into the ground at the base of the water processing unit. The marker is small and easy to overlook. In the armory section, there is a rack of decommissioned weapons displayed on the wall behind a locked cage. They are clearly decorative, but one of them has a scope mounted on it that is not a match for the weapon it is attached to. The scope's model is one that appears elsewhere in the game as functional equipment. The attachment points suggest it was placed there deliberately, not as a prop. There is a trophy case in what appears to have been an administrative lounge. Most of the trophies are generic achievement plaques. One of them is for something called the Meridian Invitational. The date on it predates the in-game lore timeline for the facility's construction. A set of lockers in the junior staff wing has one locker that is permanently open. Inside there is a jacket. The jacket has a name badge on it. The name on the badge, Solis, does not correspond to any named NPC or character in the game, but Solis appears on a crew manifest found in the operations room as a personnel entry with the status field left blank. The main stairwell has an interesting acoustic property. Every landing produces a distinct echo, except for the 3rd floor landing, which is acoustically dead. The ceiling above that landing shows signs of dense foam installation behind the dropped tile, the kind used for soundproofing in sensitive areas, along the road that leads into the map's central zone. There are mile markers. They count up from 0 as expected, except for mile marker 9, which is missing its pole entirely. The concrete base is still there. The hole in the base where the pole was seated is clean, not corroded, not damaged, The pole was removed. Inside the communications tower, there is a logbook chained to a console. Most of the log entries are date-stamped and brief. One entry near the middle of the book has no date. It reads simply, "They came back, but didn't come inside." 3 of the entries immediately following it are written in a noticeably different handwriting. The game has an ambient radio channel that plays in several locations. Most of the broadcast is static, with occasional fragments, but if you remain in range of the receiver in the eastern monitoring post for approximately 7 uninterrupted minutes, the static pattern shifts into something that sounds structured. It does not resolve into speech, but it does not sound random either. Near the flooded section of the underground, there is a section of wall with a painted timeline. It charts something in increments. Though the labels are partially obscured by water damage, the visible intervals appear to be counting down rather than up. The flooded corridor itself contains an interesting detail at its midpoint. On the floor beneath the water, there are boot prints. They move in one direction toward the sealed door at the far end, and then there are no boot prints returning. The sealed door shows no signs of having been opened. A junction box on the second level of the industrial wing has its maintenance schedule visible on a laminated card attached to its side. The schedule lists services conducted every 3 months over a span of several years. The last entry is not a service record. It is a note that reads, "Do not open." The handwriting matches none of the other entries. There is a map of the facility posted in the security office. It is a standard layout map, but if you compare it to the actual geometry of the rooms around you, there is one room on the map that does not exist in the building. It is labelled as Room 31C and is positioned between 2 rooms that in reality share a direct wall with no space between them. The bathroom on the upper floor of the residential block has a mirror. Mirrors in this game are mostly non-functional props. This one reflects the room correctly, except for one object. On the shelf behind you, visible in the mirror's reflection, there is a small red container. When you turn around, the shelf is empty. Chapter 2. Names that keep appearing. If you spend enough time in Ark Raiders paying attention to names, a pattern starts to emerge. Certain names recur across different zones, different factions, and different document types in ways that suggest either a connected narrative thread or a very deliberate set of breadcrumbs. The name Callaway appears on a shipping manifest, on a personnel file in the administrative block, and carved into the underside of a workbench in the maintenance tunnels. The shipping manifest entry is for equipment classified as personal effects. The personnel file marks Callaway as reassigned, with the destination field redacted. The carving has no context except for its location. Riven is a name that shows up exactly 3 times, on a warning label affixed to a sealed chemical container, on a handwritten note tucked inside a mechanical panel, and on a scorecard posted in the recreation room for a card game. The scorecard is dated several years before the other 2 appearances. There is a faction-adjacent name that appears without clear alignment. Sutherland. It appears on Ark administrative logs as an external contact, on graffiti in the residential area as a slur of some kind, based on context, and on a memorial placard in what appears to be a small commemorative corner of the lounge area. 3 different relationships with the same name. The name Mirror is significant mostly because of where it is absent. A photo board in the staff corridor has spaces for team photos with name labels. Most spaces have a photo. One space has a label reading Mirror and nothing else. The space has slight discoloration around its border, suggesting a photo was there and was removed relatively recently. If you read the operational logs in the control room in order, a name appears in the earliest entries, disappears entirely for a middle section, and then reappears once near the very end. The name is Okafor. Its final appearance is in a log entry that reads simply, "Okafor was right." The maintenance staff roster near the generator room has 12 names. If you count the assigned maintenance sectors, there are 13. One sector has no assigned name beside it. The sector number is the same as the one that appears on the sealed door in the underground. There is a children's drawing pinned to a wall in what was apparently a small daycare or child-friendly waiting area near the administrative section. The drawing shows two figures standing outside a building. One figure is labeled with the word Dad, the other is unlabeled. Below both figures, written in an adult hand, is the name Petra. Petra does not appear in any official game document or dialogue, but it appears in two other drawings in the same area, both clearly made by the same child. In one of them, Petra is depicted inside the building, while the other figure stands outside. The name Vale appears on a locker, on a supply request form, and on the cover of a paperback novel left on a common room table. The novel's title and contents are fictional in-game text, but the inside cover has a handwritten message that reads, "For Vale, who always knew when to leave." There is a name that appears only in sound, rather than in text. If you stand near the broken intercom in the corridor outside the storage area, at irregular intervals you can hear what sounds like a voice saying a word. Played at different pitch interpretations, it sounds most consistently like the name Harlan. The intercom is not active anywhere else in the game. A set of personnel lanyards has been left hanging on hooks near the security checkpoint. Most are blank or unreadable. One reads E. Tovar. Tovar is the same name that appears on one of the evidence tags in the storage room, suggesting that E. Tovar was connected to whatever was being catalogued there. The evidence tags in the storage room are worth reading in full. They describe ordinary items: a compass, a folded piece of cloth, a length of wire, in the language of formal evidence collection. Who is collecting evidence and why, and whether Etovar was the collector or the subject, points toward ambiguity. In the server room, a monitor that is not fully powered displays fragmented text. Among the fragments, cycling through at intervals, is a combination of characters that reads like a partial name. The legible portion ends in -nerder, which could be the end of a name like Lander or Sander or Fender. A piece of graffiti in the eastern wing shows a silhouette with a circle around its head, like a halo or targeting reticle. Next to it is written, "He saw them." Below that, in different handwriting, "No, he didn't. His name is given only by initials in this second note. JK. The initials JK reappear on a set of toolboxes in the lower workshop. Each toolbox in the row is marked with different initials, standard practice for shared tool storage. JK's box is the only one with a padlock on it, and the padlock is a different model from the ones on the other boxes. A memorial board in the lounge area lists 12 names under what appears to be a tribute heading. The heading itself is partially torn away. 11 of the names are repeated elsewhere in other in-game documents. One name, the 7th on the list, does not appear anywhere else in the entire game. That name is Ren. On the loading dock, a clipboard with a receiving log has entries for incoming shipments over what appears to be several months. Every entry has a signature in the receiver field. 15 different signatures over the whole log. The 16th entry, near the back of the log, has the receiver field filled in with the single word, "Nobody." There is a name written in condensation on a cold locker window. In the food storage area, it is faint and is partially dripped, but legible as what appears to be the name Sorrel. Below it, less clearly, is what might be a question mark. In the personnel database terminal, most files load normally. One file loads a name, and then immediately displays an error, the name that loads before the error is Flynn. The error code is not a standard system error, but rather reads access denied by request of subjective. The duty assignment board near the main entrance has a slot for a position called floor liaison. Most of the assignment slots have names in them. The floor liaison slot has a name that has been crossed out and replaced twice. The third name written in that slot has itself been crossed out and nothing written after it. In the workshop, there is a box of personal items left near a workstation. Most are tools. At the bottom of the box is a folded letter. The letter is addressed to someone whose name is not readable due to water damage. The closing line is readable and says, "Tell Remy I don't blame him." Remy does not appear anywhere else in the game in text, but there is a small figurine left on a shelf in the break room that has the letter R scratched into its base, the kind of marking someone makes to keep track of their own belongings. A framed certificate on the wall of the manager's office is partially obscured by a filing cabinet that has been pushed against the wall. The visible portion shows a partial name ending in -ton and a partial institution name that includes the letters LEIX. Heliax appears one other time in the game on a stamp on the inside cover of a technical manual in the engineering bay. The stamp is red and reads, Helix approved with a date. There is a name on the whiteboard in the briefing room that was written and then erased. The erasure was not complete. Under certain light angles, the name is legible as Dressler. Chapter 3. Objects out of place. One of the most reliable ways to find an Easter egg in Ark Raiders is to ask whether an object makes practical sense in its location. Often, it does not. A child's toy, a small wheeled vehicle, sits on top of a server rack in the communications hub. The server rack is approximately 2 meters tall. The toy shows no signs of having been thrown or knocked up there. It sits level and stable as though placed carefully. In the weapons storage room, behind a rack of decommissioned Ark equipment, there is a single coffee mug. It is a civilian mug, the kind sold in stores, with a decorative print on it. The print shows a cartoon crab holding a flag. It is completely incongruous with everything around it. The coffee mug with the crab is also not empty. There is a folded piece of paper inside it. The paper is small and tightly folded. When you examine it, it unfolds to show a series of numbers arranged in a grid, like a simple cipher key or a bingo card. A framed photograph sits on a desk in the planning room. Framed photographs in this game typically show groups of workers or facility exteriors. This one shows a single person standing on a beach. The frame is bent on one corner, suggesting it fell at some point. The photo is tucked slightly too far to the right in the frame, as if it was reinserted. After being removed, in the middle of the underground maintenance route, there is a decorative potted plant. It is plastic. It is in perfect condition. It is sitting on a folding table in a section of tunnel that has no other furniture of any kind for at least 50 meters in either direction. Its placement suggests it was brought here intentionally rather than abandoned. Below the potted plant, the folding table has a small label on its leg. Most pieces of facility furniture have asset tags. This table's tag has been covered with a sticker. The sticker is a smiley face, the kind you get from a dentist or a classroom reward system. The security office has a row of monitors showing camera feeds. Most feeds show empty rooms and corridors. One feed shows a room that players cannot access during normal gameplay. The room in the camera feed contains a single chair and a single lamp. The lamp is on. The lamp in that inaccessible room is the only light source in any camera feed that appears to be actively lit by something other than facility lighting. The quality of the light it casts suggests an incandescent bulb, a type not used anywhere else in the visible facility. There is a pair of boots outside the door to the shower room in the residential block. This would be unremarkable except that the boots are outside the door on the inside of the building. They are facing the door as if the person wearing them just walked up to it and stepped out of them before entering. But there is no corresponding second pair or any indication of where the wearer went afterward. One of the cots in the dormitory section has been very precisely made. Tight hospital corners, pillow-centered, no wrinkles. Every other cot in the room is in varying states of use or dishevelment. This one looks like it was made to pass inspection on the day the facility was abandoned and has not been touched since. On that made cot, tucked just under the edge of the pillow, is a small notebook. It is blank except for one page near the middle, which has a single compass bearing written on it. The bearing points toward the eastern cliffside. The eastern cliffside bearing leads to an unremarkable stretch of rock face if you simply go there, but if you approach from the specific angle that the compass bearing implies, standing at the origin point of the cot and projecting a line toward the cliff, you are looking directly at the scratch marks that form the word echo. A chess set has been left mid-game on a table in the common room. Most of the pieces are scattered as if knocked over. 3 pieces remain standing, both kings and 1 knight. The knight belongs to neither king's colour. It is a third colour entirely, which does not correspond to standard chess sets. There is a drain cover in the utility corridor that is the wrong size for the drain beneath it. The cover is larger than the opening, resting on top rather than fitting into it. The drain cover has an embossed logo that does not match the manufacturer stamped on the surrounding floor tiles. In the eastern stairwell, at the top of the second flight, there is a small pile of coins, 8 coins total. They are not in-game currency items, they are purely decorative props that cannot be interacted with, but the specific number and arrangement of the coins matches a sequence shown on the cipher key found inside the coffee mug in the weapons storage room. A vending machine in the break room has been mostly emptied. One slot still has an item in it. The item is not food or drink. It is a small sealed envelope. The vending machine's interface suggests the envelope was stocked as a purchasable item, priced at 0 credits. The 0 credit envelope is not interactable during normal gameplay, but the fact that it was priced at 0, rather than removed or simply absent, suggests whoever stocked the machine wanted it to be available to anyone without cost. On the underside of the break room table nearest the vending machine, there is writing. It is a list of 4 words: clock, mirror, hatch, crane. Each word has been crossed out except the last one. Crane refers, potentially, to the loading crane visible through the window of the loading dock. The crane has a cab that in the game's geometry is accessible if approached from an angle most players would not think to try. The cab contains a hard hat and a lunchbox, and nothing else that seems unusual. But the lunchbox is locked. The locked lunchbox cannot be opened through standard gameplay. It is treated as decoration, but the lock on it is a combination dial, and the combination shown in the game's rendering is already set to a number: 7, 1, 4, 14, the number on the water tower. In the chemical storage room, there is a shelf of labeled containers. The labels follow a consistent naming convention, except for one container on the second shelf from the top, third from the right. Its label reads in the same format as the others, but the substance name is simply the letter X. A map of the local terrain has been hand annotated in red pen on a corkboard in the navigation room. The annotations mark several points of interest, most of which correspond to real map features. One red mark is placed on a location that, in the actual game map, corresponds to an empty stretch of open ground with nothing visible at that point. In the armory anteroom, there is a pair of gloves resting on a bench. One glove is inside out, the other is right side out. This would be unremarkable except that the inside out glove has writing on its inner surface. The writing is too small to read from normal viewing distance. Chapter 4: Audio Secrets That Most People Miss. Arc Raiders has a sound design philosophy that rewards headphones and patience. Underneath the surface of its ambient layers, there are audio details that seem to exist purely for attentive players. In the main entrance corridor, the ventilation hum has an irregular rhythm. If you listen for an extended period, the irregularity repeats with a consistent pattern. The pattern, when transcribed as short and long beats, maps to a Morse sequence. That sequence decodes to the number 33. The number 33 does not appear visibly anywhere near the entrance corridor, but the communications tower has a frequency selector panel. And the 33rd frequency on that panel, if you scroll through all of them, produces a distinct tone rather than static. That tone, when played alongside the ambient hum of the entrance corridor at the same time, creates a harmonic interference that is audible as a third, lower note. That note corresponds to a frequency that is, in real-world audio, used as a calibration reference tone in old broadcast equipment. There is a piano in the common room. It is clearly ornamental, partially disassembled, missing several keys. If you strike the remaining playable keys in a specific order, the combination that produces a recognizable musical phrase is the same 4-note opening of a folk melody associated with the region the game's lore implies the facility is located in. The in-game radio channels you can encounter have several dead channels. Most dead channels are pure static. One of them, accessible only in the northeast monitoring station, produces static that sounds processed. It has a rhythmic quality. If you record and analyze the rhythm, it appears to follow a breathing pattern, slow, approximately once every 6 seconds. In the flooded corridor, the sound of water dripping echoes differently at different points. At one specific point near the center, the echo returns twice rather than once. The geometry does not support a double echo based on visible wall placement, suggesting an unseen surface or cavity. The sound of your footsteps on grating, common in the industrial areas, plays one unexpected frame of audio at very long intervals. Every few minutes of continuous walking on grating, a single footstep sound plays that is slightly different in timbre, lower, and heavier, as if a second person took one step behind you. That sound does not appear in the areas with visible NPCs or enemy spawns. It is isolated to the grating sections of the industrial zone that are otherwise empty. It plays consistently across multiple playthroughs, suggesting it is intentional rather than a glitch. The briefing room projector, if left running without interaction, cycles through a set of still images. After the standard slides, if you wait long enough, a single additional image appears before the loop restarts. The image is text on a black background. The text is too brief to read at normal playback speed, but appears to be a single sentence. Players who have frame capped recordings of this sequence report that the text reads something along the lines of, "The second team never reported in." The sentence appears for approximately 2 frames before the loop resets. There is a broken speaker in the eastern residential hallway. It produces no audio under normal circumstances, but if you fire a weapon within a specific radius of it, the feedback from the gunshot seems to trigger a residual audio response in the speaker, a very brief, staticky fragment of what sounds like a voice saying a single word. The word, based on multiple player recordings, sounds most like either wait or late. In the server room, the banks of machines produce a constant low drone. Within that drone, using audio analysis software, players have identified what appears to be a recurring pattern that emerges every 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The pattern is consistent enough to appear deliberate, but short enough that real-time listening would rarely catch it. The infirmary has a heartbeat monitor that is still powered but showing a flat line. This is standard environmental decoration in games. What is unusual is that on a cycle measured at roughly every 12 seconds, the flatline display pulses very slightly, barely perceptible, as if registering something extremely faint. The pulse on the monitor corresponds in timing to the breathing rhythm of the dead channel radio in the northeast monitoring station. There is a section of the underground path where the ambient track shifts in a way that the game does not sonically transition into or out of smoothly. Most ambient transitions in Arc Raiders are gradual crossfades. This one cuts abruptly and then cuts back. The audio during that section has a quality like silence, with pressure in it, the kind of sound design used to suggest enclosed or underground spaces, significantly deeper than the visible surroundings. One of the Arc faction communications you can overhear, played through a speaker at a base camp, includes a standard operations readout. Most of it is procedural, but at one point, the speaker pauses mid-sentence, and the pause lasts slightly longer than natural speech rhythm would dictate. When the speaker continues, the sentence picks up as if nothing happened, but the missing word, audible as a breath, would grammatically have been a name. There is a musical box in the display cabinet in the administrative lounge. It cannot be wound or activated, but in a specific sound zone nearby, you can very faintly hear what appears to be the tune the musical box would play if wound, as if the ambient audio system is playing the melody at the edge of audibility. That melody is not original. It matches closely enough to be unmistakable, a lullaby associated with a specific cultural tradition that the game's lore places in the backstory of one of the facility's original founding groups. In the generator rooms, the generator noise masks a layer of audio beneath it. If you trigger a power down event and the generators cycle off, in the brief silence before emergency lighting takes over, there is a sound that lasts approximately 3 seconds. It has been described by players variously as wind, as breathing, and as a voice speaking too quietly to understand. The emergency lighting tone that activates after a power-down event includes a single anomalous frequency in its warning alarm. The alarm cycles through its standard tones, but one cycle includes a tone that is lower and longer than the pattern. It appears once per alarm cycle and then does not repeat. Near the supply depot, the outdoor ambient audio includes standard environmental sounds: wind, distant structural noise, the occasional creak of metal. At irregular intervals, too infrequent to notice without extended listening, there is a sound that does not fit those categories. It sounds like a door closing somewhere in the middle distance. No door in the accessible geometry of the supply depot area produces that sound. Chapter 5: Wall Markings, Graffiti, and Hidden Text. The written surfaces of Arc Raiders hold more information than first appears. The graffiti, scrawled notes, carved text, and stenciled labels across the game world function almost as a secondary document layer, one made by people rather than by Arc's institutional machinery. In the eastern residential wing, there is a section of wall that has been heavily marked over time. The oldest marks are faded and harder to read. The newest are relatively crisp. Reading them in reverse chronological order, newest to oldest, they form what could be read as a conversation between multiple authors across an indeterminate period. The conversation on the wall begins with someone asserting that the schedule is wrong. A second voice adds that they know it is wrong. A third voice, apparently written later, simply adds the word obviously. The oldest visible contribution to this wall conversation is a drawing of a door in the men's locker room. One of the lockers has been converted into a kind of informal message center. Notes are stuck to the inside and outside of the door, most of them mundane requests or reminders. One note on the inside of the door, folded and older than the others, says, "If something happens, talk to Reyes in Section 4. There is no Section 4 identifiable on any of the facility maps, and Reyes does not appear on any personnel roster accessible in the game. The note's survival inside the locker suggests it was not widely read. The underside of the main conference room table has a word scratched into it. Agreed. It is in a position that would be most readable by someone sitting at the head of the table, facing the rest of the room. It appears to be a reminder or a resolve, written to be seen at the start of a meeting rather than during it. In the laboratory section, one of the whiteboards has equations on it that are consistent with real-world physics or chemistry. Most players walk past assuming they are flavor decoration. A few who have examined them closely suggest the equations describe something related to wave interference or signal propagation, consistent with the communication research implied by other parts of the facility. Below the equations, in much smaller writing, someone has added a comment in what looks like a different marker. This is wrong. They did not correct it. One section of wall in the tunnels near the flooded corridor has been used for a tally system. Groups of 5 marks, the classic method. The tally is not counting days in the straightforward sense because there are gaps between groups, some groups underlined, some circled. The last visible mark is a single one that has been crossed out rather than completed. A fire evacuation diagram posted in the staff corridor shows the standard emergency routes highlighted in red. On this particular diagram, someone has added a handwritten route in blue pen that does not connect to any exit shown on the diagram. It leads to a room that is not labelled on the evacuation map. In the vehicle bay, one of the walls has a set of racing stripe-style decorative marks that seem like they were added by workers for personalization. Among those marks, integrated into the pattern in the same paint but slightly different brushwork, is an arrow pointing to a specific section of the floor. The floor at that point looks identical to the floor everywhere else in the bay. The dormitory hallway has door number plates on each room. The number plates follow a sequential order, with one exception. Between doors numbered 22 and 24, door 23 is missing its plate. The door is there. The mounting holes, where the plate should be, are visible. The plate was removed. On the back of the door to the room that would be 23. Visible only when the door is open and you step inside. Someone has drawn an eye. It is a simple drawing, but carefully done, with a clear pupil and what appears to be a teardrop below it. The outdoor perimeter wall on the southern approach has a layer of weather-faded paint markings that look like utility markings, the kind left by surveyors or cable locators. Most follow the standard utility marking color codes. One cluster of marks uses a color that does not correspond to any real-world utility marking standard, a mustard yellow that conventionally would not mean anything. Those yellow marks form a pattern that, when traced, matches the shape of a key. Inside the janitor's storage closet, there is a collection of cleaning supply labels affixed to a wall, apparently a makeshift organizational system. Among the standard product names is one label that reads, "Away," just the word, in the same format and label stock as the others, as though it was stocked as a cleaning product called Away. In the recreational area, a dartboard has been used extensively. The dartboard itself is not interactive, but the wall around the dartboard, beyond the standard scorekeeping zone, has been marked up with various notes and drawings. One of these, in the upper left quadrant, shows a rough floor plan of a room. The room in the sketch matches the layout of the inaccessible room visible on the security camera feed. On the side of the fuel tank in the loading bay, written in what appears to be industrial paint marker, "1 is still on." This is ambiguous enough to invite interpretation. One engine, one light, one person. The word still does a lot of work. The ceiling tiles in the administrative corridor have been pushed aside in one location, leaving a gap. Inside the gap, there is nothing visible from the ground, but the surrounding ceiling tiles, on their tops, have writing on them. The writing would have been placed there before the tiles were installed, or during a period when someone was working above the ceiling. The writing is a list of names, different from those found elsewhere in the game. Chapter 6. The recurring symbols. Beyond names and text, Ark Raiders distributes a set of recurring symbols across its environments. Some are institutional, but some seem personal. Some appear in places that suggest they are being left as marks rather than applied for any functional reason. The Ark administrative symbol, a formal insignia used on documents and signage, appears in its expected form throughout the facility. But in several locations, a version of this symbol appears that has been altered, modified, with additional lines or marks, in ways that change its meaning if interpreted through the lens of the law documents that describe Ark's internal communication systems. One modified version of the symbol has a horizontal line struck through it. This appears 3 times: on the outside of a sealed door, on a crate marked for disposal, and on the forehead of a figure in a mural in the recreational area. The mural figure is otherwise depicted positively, which makes the marking ambiguous rather than straightforwardly negative. There is a circle dot symbol, a filled dot within a circle, that appears consistently across several zones. It does not match Ark's documented symbol system. It appears on walls, on equipment, on the inside covers of journals, and carved into wooden surfaces. It always appears alone, never combined with text. The circle dot appears a total of 17 times across the accessible game world. The locations, when mapped, do not form a recognizable geographic pattern, but if you number them in order of first encounter following the critical path, the 17th one is located directly adjacent to the one locked door that cannot be opened. An X in a box symbol appears specifically in the underground areas. It is stenciled rather than hand-drawn, suggesting it was applied with a template. It appears on 8 surfaces, always at approximately knee height, always on surfaces that in context represent boundaries or thresholds rather than walls in the middle of a space. There is a symbol that looks like a stylized wave or frequency curve that appears on both Ark equipment and on surfaces that are clearly non-Ark in origin. Its appearance on both institutional and informal surfaces suggests either that the symbol predates Ark's use of it, or that someone within Ark was also using it in an unofficial personal capacity. The same wave symbol appears on the inside of the front cover of the law-significant journal in the communications hub. It appears there in pencil, faint, as if sketched rather than deliberately placed. In the entryway to the facility's lower level, someone has stacked rocks in a small cairn formation. This is not a functional game object. It has no interaction prompt. It simply sits there, a small pile of 3 rocks balanced on a ledge, in an area otherwise devoid of anything decorative or personal. Cairns, as a symbol, have multiple readings in the context of the game's implied geography and lore. They mark paths, they mark graves, they mark places where something happened that someone wanted to remember. The cairn in the lower level entryway, given its location at a threshold, points toward any of those interpretations. There is a series of tally-like marks on the wall of the observation deck that, rather than counting a number, appear to be counting a direction. Each mark has a small arrowhead component, following all the arrows in sequence. They spiral inward toward a single point on the wall, where the plaster is slightly damaged. The damaged plaster point, when examined, reveals a cavity in the wall. The cavity is empty. The edges of the cavity are smooth, not rough, suggesting the object removed from it was retrieved, rather than the cavity just happening. A sun symbol, simple and childlike, appears in 3 places in the game. On the wall of the daycare area, alongside the children's drawings, on the inner surface of a hard hat in the crane cab, and on the sole of one of the boots outside the shower room. The third appearance in particular, on the bottom of a boot, would only be visible if the boot was removed and turned over. It looks like a marker for ownership, the way a parent might mark a child's belongings. There is a symbol that looks like 2 overlapping diamonds that appears twice, once on the blast door of the secondary storage unit, and once on the back of a photograph found in the planning room. The photo shows 2 people standing together. Their faces are not visible because the photo has been folded to show only their feet and lower legs. The diamond symbol is written on the photo in pen. The chemical storage area has a hazard symbol system that uses standard international iconography. One container has a hazard symbol that does not exist in the standard international set. It resembles the existing biohazard symbol, but with one of the 3 circular elements replaced by something that looks more like an eye. Chapter 7. The law that almost says something. There is a subset of Easter eggs in Ark Raiders that exist at the edge of meaning. They are not random, they connect to things, but they stop just short of resolving, which suggests they were designed to be interpretable rather than solvable. The operational logs in the control room document routine facility activity for a period of several years. They are mostly mundane, but at one point, the log style changes. Not the content, but the authorial voice. The earlier entries are written in passive institutional language. After a specific date, the entries shift to first person. The first person entries never explicitly identify who is writing them. They refer to other staff members by title rather than name. They describe operational problems in the same format as before, except that the problems described are different in nature, less technical, more interpersonal. Things are going wrong between people rather than between machines. There is a gap in the log that spans exactly 11 days. When the log resumes after the gap, the writing style has returned to passive, institutional language. The first entry after the gap begins mid-sentence, as if a longer entry was truncated. One of the journals found in the residential area is written partly in code. The code is not complex. It appears to be a simple substitution cipher using a key that is visible elsewhere in the environment. The decoded content of the coded sections does not reveal dramatic secrets. It reveals the writer's personal feelings about another person at the facility, feelings that the writer apparently considered too sensitive to write plainly. The person the journal writer has feelings about matches the physical description in the drawing in the daycare area, the one labelled Petra, closely enough to suggest they are the same individual. A set of communiques in the operations room describes an incident. The incident is referred to throughout as the event on the 14th. The nature of the event is never stated directly. The communiques discuss containment, personnel movement, and communication protocols in the aftermath. The language is careful in a way that suggests awareness of potential review. One communique in the set is clearly a response to one that is missing. It says, "That was not an authorized action, and the explanation you have given does not change that. We are proceeding as planned." The person it is addressed to is referred to only as field lead. There is a research document about a material described as responding to specific frequency ranges. The document is technical and reads authentically, but at the bottom of the last page, handwritten, is a note that says, "The response is not consistent. It is stronger near the eastern section." We don't know why yet. The eastern section is the part of the facility with the most anomalous details. The door that cannot be opened, the camera feed room with the lit lamp, the compass bearing from the dormitory notebook, the dead radio channel. A timeline written on a whiteboard in the planning room shows a project schedule. Most of it is standard project planning, milestones, review dates, dependencies. One task on the timeline has been given a name rather than a description. The task is called acknowledgement. It appears late in the timeline, after all other tasks, and has no completion date next to it. There is a briefing document that outlines a protocol called Condition White. Most protocol documents in the game describe operational procedures with specific steps. Condition White is described entirely in terms of what it is not. It is not a full evacuation. It is not a lockdown. It is not a standard maintenance hold. The positive content of what Condition White actually involves is never stated. A map annotation in the planning room marks a location with the note, "Signal origin estimated." The location marked is outside the facility boundaries. It is in open terrain. There is no in-game content at that map location during normal gameplay. One of the Arc Lord documents describes a distinction between authorized personnel and essential personnel that does not track with conventional security categorization. The document implies that essential personnel have access to a category of facility resource not mentioned anywhere else in the document set. In the personal effects storage at the security checkpoint, most items are labeled with a reference number and a brief description. One item's description reads only, "Unknown device, believed personal." The item itself is a small disk with no visible function, sitting in a sealed bag. There is a letter in the outgoing mail tray in the administrative office. Mail trays in this game are typically decorative. This tray has one item in it. The letter is sealed. The address on the envelope is to a location described only as the Northern Station. There is a return address that shows the facility name but with a different identifier than the one used everywhere else in the facility's official documents. A personal journal in the residential area records daily observations for several weeks. The observations are specific enough to be almost surveillance-like. They describe which staff members went where and when, what they said in group settings, and who spoke to whom. The final entry in the journal says simply, "I'm certain now." Chapter 8. Cross-map connections. Some of the most interesting Easter eggs in Ark Raiders are not self-contained in a single location. They require information from one area to make sense of something in a completely different area. These cross-map connections feel like the deepest layer of the game's hidden content. The combination lock in the research annex, opened with the sequence from the supply crate serial numbers, connects to the audio cue that sounds like a distant beacon. That beacon tone corresponds in frequency to one of the marked frequencies on the communications tower selector panel. That panel frequency, when active, produces a change in the ambient audio of the server room. The server room ambient change, subtle as it is, slightly alters the regular drone pattern in a way that pushes one of its harmonic frequencies into the range audible as the low note produced when the entrance corridor hum and the tower tone are combined. That low note, in its real-world calibration context, is the same note used as a reference tone by the broadcast equipment that the musical box melody in the administrative lounge would have originally been recorded on. The musical box melody is the same as the lullaby connected to the facility's founding group. This chain of connections does not point conclusively toward any narrative fact, but it suggests that someone, either within the game's fiction or in the design process, placed these elements in conversation with each other, deliberately. The name Solis on the locker in the junior staff wing connects to the crew manifest personnel entry with the blank status field. The blank status field is one of 12 on that manifest. 11 other entries have statuses that range from active to transferred to deceased. The blank status, given that context, points towards something that does not fit any of those categories. The 12 entries on the memorial board in the lounge correspond in number, but not in all names, to the 12 status entries on the crew manifest. 7 names appear on both lists. 5 do not. Those 5 are unique to either the memorial or the manifest, but not to both. The 5 names that appear only on the memorial board and not on the manifest suggest people who were memorialized but not officially recorded in the facility's personnel system, that could indicate pre-facility deaths, off-site incidents, or deliberate omission from official records. The children's drawings in the daycare area read in order of apparent age based on artistic development, describe a progression. The first drawings show the inside of a building with many people. The middle drawings show fewer people. The later drawings show mostly empty spaces, with 1 or 2 figures. The figure labelled DADA appears in the early and middle drawings. It does not appear in the later ones. The later drawings have a recurring shape that does not appear in the earlier ones. It is an oblong, horizontal form that in context could be read as a vehicle, a container, or a bed. The boot prints in the flooded corridor move toward the sealed door. The sealed door's serial number matches the sector without an assigned name on the maintenance roster. The maintenance roster note, "Do not open," is in handwriting that matches closely enough to be notable. The handwriting of the first-person log entries in the control room. The chemical container labelled X in the chemical storage room has a safety data sheet in the file cabinet next to the storage shelves. Most safety data sheets in the cabinet correspond to labelled containers. The sheet filed in the X position does not describe a chemical. It describes a frequency range. A frequency range is not a substance. The frequency range described in that document, when mapped against the communications tower panel, falls between 2 adjacent settings. Neither setting produces the output implied by the document, but the midpoint between the 2 settings is a value that the panel cannot be set to manually, because the dial moves in fixed increments. The fixed increment dial system on the communications tower has a total of 40 positions. The gap between positions 33 and 34 is where the frequency from the chemical storage document would fall. Position 33 is the one that produces the distinct calibration tone. The lunchbox in the crane cab has a combination of 714. The water tower has the number 14. The sealed maintenance sector's number 14. The coin arrangement in the stairwell matches the cipher grid from the coffee mug. The cipher grid, applied to the number 14, produces a 3-digit output. That output is 714. The cipher grid in the coffee mug is therefore the key that connects the water tower to the lunchbox. The lunchbox cannot be opened, but the connection between these 3 objects, the water tower, the cipher, and the lunchbox, forms a triangle of references that all point to something unreachable. The Thorn note on the corkboard, Thorn in the graffiti, Thorn in the post carving, Thorn on the locker tag, and Hawthorne scratched into the underground wall point toward a name. Hawthorne. Hawthorne does not appear on any personnel document, but there is a plaque in the administrative corridor, partially obscured by a moved cabinet whose visible portion shows a name ending in -ton and an institution including the letters Helix. If the full name on that plaque is Hawthorne, then Helix and Hawthorne are connected, and Helix appears on the approval stamp inside the technical manual in the engineering bay. The technical manual is for the same frequency response material described in the research document that notes the unexpectedly strong response in the eastern section. The eastern section is where the dead radio channel operates. The dead radio channel has the same breathing rhythm as the heartbeat monitor pulse in the infirmary. The infirmary is where the examination table with the urgently released restraints is located. That examination table, viewed from the angle of the mirror in the bathroom above, would be visible in the reflection if the bathroom were directly above the infirmary. The bathroom is not directly above the infirmary. It is offset by 1 room's width. But the red container that appears in the mirror and not in the actual room is positioned in the reflection at the correct distance and angle to be sitting on that examination table. The figure in the mural in the recreational area, the one with the modified arc symbol, struck through on its forehead, is standing in a pose that mirrors a photograph found in the planning room. The photograph is folded to show only feet and lower legs. The shoes on the photograph match the shoes of the mural figure. The two overlapping diamonds on the blast door and on the photograph connect the storage unit to the two people in the photograph. Whatever is in the secondary storage unit, its access is associated with the two people depicted. The child's sun symbol appears in the daycare, in the crane cab, and on the bottom of the boot outside the shower room. 3 spaces: a child space, a workspace, and a personal space. One symbol, linking what appears to be a parent's movement through the facility, carrying the mark the way you carry something for the child you are away from. The last visible chapter of the operational log ends with an entry that does not match any operational event. It reads, "Listening." The timestamp on that entry is a date that, cross-referenced against the project timeline on the planning room whiteboard, falls 2 days after the acknowledgement milestone with no completion date. Something was acknowledged. Then someone was listening. Then the log stops. The chair in the inaccessible room, visible on the security camera feed, is the same model as the chair at the head of the conference room table. The table with "agreed" scratched into its underside. The lamp in that room is still on. Chapter 9. The rooms nobody talks about. There are spaces in Arc Raiders that players pass through without thinking twice. Utility rooms, access corridors, maintenance bays. These spaces are designed to feel functional and forgettable, but several of them contain details that suggest they were used for purposes not reflected in any official documentation. In the secondary maintenance wing, there is a room marked on internal maps as a tool staging area. It contains tools, but it also contains a cot folded against the wall on a hinge. The cot is the collapsible kind used in temporary accommodations. Its presence in a tool staging area, combined with a folded blanket sitting on top of it, suggests someone was sleeping here regularly. The blanket on the staging area cot is folded in a very specific way, the same tight fold visible on the maid cot in the dormitory section. The two locations are on opposite ends of the facility. Either the same person made both beds, or both people were trained by the same individual. There is a storage room accessed from a side corridor in the industrial wing that has no item markers and no quest associations. Most players dismiss it as empty dressing, but on the back wall, partially behind a shelving unit that can be pushed aside, there is a whiteboard. The whiteboard has a diagram on it that looks like an org chart, except that the boxes are connected in loops rather than in a hierarchy. 2 boxes in the diagram are circled in red. The org chart on that hidden whiteboard does not match any official ARC organizational structure visible elsewhere in the game. The 2 circled boxes do not have names in them. They have symbols. One is the circle dot, the other is the wave. In the recycling processing area, there is a room that handles paper waste. It contains a shredder and bins of shredded material. One of the bins has been left unemptied. Inside the bin, among the shredded strips, are strips from a document that was shredded while still partially readable on each strip. Assembling the strips mentally, the visible text fragments describe something involving authorization levels and timeline adjustments. One strip reads clearly, "Not to be discussed outside." The loading area has a freight manager's booth with a window overlooking the docks. The booth is small, barely large enough for one person. Inside it, there are 2 chairs, 2 coffee cups. Both cups have been used. The booth is not large enough for 2 people to work in comfortably, which means whoever used both chairs was either working very closely with someone or meeting them privately. One of the coffee cups in the freight booth has a residue pattern consistent with being set down repeatedly in the same spot, a dark ring on the window ledge. The other cup has no such ring. One person came here regularly. The other visited. There is a crawl space access hatch in the ceiling of the East Wing utility corridor. All other access hatches in the facility are sealed or locked. This one is not. It is closed, but unlatched. The interior of the crawl space above it, visible by crouching and looking up through the gap, contains what appears to be a small collection of personal objects resting on the crawl space floor directly above the hatch. Those personal objects are not interactable. They are environmental props, placed there deliberately. The visible ones include a small mirror, a folded envelope, and what appears to be a hand-drawn map. The map's details are not fully legible from below. In the basement level, there is a mechanical room that houses pumps for the facility's water system. Tucked between two large pumps, reachable only by squeezing into the narrow gap between them, is a lunch bag. The lunch bag contains the remnants of a meal that was apparently abandoned rather than finished. A half-eaten food item, a sealed drink container, and a napkin. On the napkin, someone has written a single word in pen. Tomorrow. The word tomorrow on the napkin points toward plans that were interrupted. The food has not decomposed in the game's rendering, which puts it outside the realm of literal interpretation. But the placement of the bag, deep between equipment, hidden from casual observation, suggests whoever left it was not eating there casually. They were eating there to avoid being seen. There is a room on the upper level of the residential block that does not appear on the fire evacuation diagram. It is accessible through an unmarked door at the end of a service corridor. Inside the room, there is a folding table and two chairs, and nothing else, except for a single framed photograph on the wall. The photograph shows a landscape, not a facility or people. Hills and a body of water. The framed landscape in the unmarked room is the only photograph in the entire game that depicts outdoor scenery unrelated to the facility. Every other photograph shows people, equipment, or facility locations. This one exists in apparent isolation in a room that does not officially exist. In the east monitoring post, there is a closet that contains communications equipment. Most of the equipment is standard issue and labeled. One device in the closet is not labeled. It is compact, military adjacent in its aesthetic, and connected to a wire that runs into the wall, and unlike most wires that enter walls in this game, it has a wire gauge and connector type that do not match the facility's standard installation specifications. It appears to have been installed separately. The sub-basement has a room marked on no accessible map. It is reachable only through a maintenance hatch that most players assume leads to a dead end. The room contains ARC-branded storage containers, all sealed, and a single operational light fixture. The light fixture is on a separate circuit from the rest of the sub-basement. Its switch is inside the room, not outside it. A switch inside the room and not outside it means the light was turned on from inside. Whatever or whoever turned it on either left through a route not visible in the geometry, or is the lamp that is still on. In the facility's waste disposal area, there is a collection of items that were apparently set aside from the regular disposal stream. They sit in a corner, slightly apart from the actual disposal bins. Among them is a damaged ARC administrative folder and a small electronic component. The component's model number, partially visible on its casing, begins with the same prefix as the unknown device in the sealed bag at the security checkpoint. The ceiling of the cleaning supply storage room has a hatch. It is slightly different from the standard maintenance hatches throughout the facility. This one has been painted over from below, the same paint color as the ceiling, in a way that would make it invisible to anyone not looking for it. The paint job is thorough enough to suggest significant effort. In the northwest corner of the facility, there is a fire suppression control room. Its function is clearly labeled. Its contents are mostly unremarkable suppression equipment and control panels. But on the floor of this room, partially under the control panel housing, is a single playing card. It is face down. Its back design does not match any deck visible elsewhere in the game. There is a room adjacent to the armory that is labeled as an equipment testing area. The room has targets on the walls and marks on the floor indicating distances. Standard range setup. But among the distance marks on the floor, one of them is marked at a distance, shorter than any practical test distance. It is approximately half a meter from one wall, a mark that close to the wall would be meaningless for testing. It appears to mark a position, not a distance. That position mark on the floor of the testing room is directly below a ventilation grate. The ventilation grate has a small piece of wire wrapped around one of its screws. The wire is not part of the grate's installation. It was added later. It holds nothing. It is simply there, looped once and twisted. Chapter 10: Items you were not meant to find. Some objects in Arc Raiders exist in locations that require deliberate effort to reach or deliberate attention to notice. These are not loot items with gameplay value. They are objects with narrative weight, placed where they are for players willing to go further than the game asks them to. In the ventilation shaft, accessible from the upper maintenance corridor, there is a clear path for approximately 10 meters before the shaft narrows to an impassable point. At that narrow point, just before it becomes impassable, there is a folded paper crane. It is a paper folding craft made from what appears to be a page torn from a technical manual. The folding is precise and practiced. The technical manual page, used to fold the crane, partially legible from the fold lines, appears to be from the same manual as the HE Helix stamp. The section visible describes installation tolerances for signal receiving components. Deep in the flooded section, below the waterline at a point most players do not submerge into, there is an object resting on the floor of the flooded corridor. It is a wristwatch. It is face up. Its hands are stopped at a specific time. 3:14. The watch is not rusted, which in the game's logic suggests it was placed there more recently than the flooding. A 3:14 time reading on a stopped watch can mean many things. It is also the 314th minute of the day if you count from midnight, and 314 appears as a partial number on one of the Arc administrative frequency allocation documents in a section describing reserved channels. In the crane cab, behind the hard hat and the locked lunchbox, there is a third item that many players do not notice because it is tucked behind the seat: a set of binoculars. The binoculars themselves are not unusual, but they are pointed, resting in a position that suggests they were left mid-use rather than stored at a specific point on the horizon visible through the cab window. The point on the horizon that the binoculars are aimed at corresponds, on the hand-annotated terrain map in the navigation room, to the red mark placed on the location in open terrain with no visible in-game content, under a raised floor panel in the server room, a panel that lifts when approached from a specific angle. There is a small notebook. The notebook is engineering format, graph paper, spiral bound. The first several pages contain technical diagrams that appear to relate to the server infrastructure. The last 2 pages contain something different: a list of dates and times with no accompanying labels or explanations. The dates and times in the server room notebook do not correspond to any logged events visible in the operational logs. They appear to predate the log records. The gaps between the listed times are irregular. The intervals suggest something that happened repeatedly, but not on a schedule. There is an object in the rafters of the loading dock that is not immediately visible from ground level. Climbing to the elevated catwalk and looking back down reveals it: a bag, tied with cord to one of the structural beams. The bag is canvas, military surplus style. It is too high up to interact with, but its existence up in the rafters implies either that it was placed there with access to the catwalk, or that someone very specifically wanted it in a location that was difficult to reach casually. In the locker room closest to the underground entrance, behind a panel that appears to be a decorative backing to the lockers, but actually pops free, there is a hidden shelf. On the shelf, 2 items: a compass and a handwritten note. The compass needle points in a fixed direction that does not match magnetic north in the game's geography. The note says only, "It always points there." The direction the compass in the hidden locker shelf points, projected outward from the locker room, aligns with the eastern cliffside. It aligns specifically with the echo carving. The compass, the dormitory notebook bearing, and the reversed painted arrows all converge on the same point on the cliff. 3 different navigation aids, placed in 3 different locations, all directing attention to the same carved word. On the roof access level, reachable through the maintenance stairwell, there is a small area behind the HVAC units where the wind noise reduces enough to hear clearly. On the wall in that sheltered area, someone has painted a mural. The mural is small, maybe half a meter square. It shows a figure looking up at a sky full of signal waves, rendered in the style of the wave symbol found throughout the facility. The figure in the roof mural has no face, but it has a lanyard around its neck. The lanyard is painted in enough detail to suggest a specific card on it. The card on the lanyard in the mural appears to show the same circle dot symbol found throughout the facility. There is a decommissioned communications unit in the storage area that has been modified. Its casing has been partially opened and the interior reworked with components that were not part of its original manufacture. The modification appears functional. Someone attempted to change what this device received or transmitted. Whether they succeeded is not answerable from the physical object alone. In the women's locker room, a mirror above one of the sinks has a word written on it in what appears to be grease pencil. Still, the word is written in small letters in the lower right corner of the mirror, where you would see it when looking at your own reflection. It is positioned precisely enough that it reads clearly regardless of the viewer's height, suggesting it was written with awareness of where eyes naturally land. Under one of the workbenches in the engineering bay, taped to the underside, there is a flash drive. It is a consumer-grade storage device, not ARC branded. It cannot be interacted with, but it is positioned under a workbench, labelled with the same asset number as the JK toolboxes in the lower workshop. The flash drive has a small label on it, one letter, M, in the utility crawl space beneath the cafeteria. Accessible through a floor hatch behind the serving counter, there is a collection of items that appear to have been stored carefully over time. Not abandoned, accumulated. There are canned goods, a water purification tablet packet, a folded map of the surrounding terrain, and a hand charger for an electronic device. Someone was preparing to survive independently of facility resources. The folded terrain map in the cafeteria crawl space has routes marked on it in pencil. The routes avoid roads and marked structures. They move through open terrain toward the northern edge of the map. The destination, where the pencil routes converge, is unmarked on the map itself. It is simply a point in open ground. That convergence point, when overlaid with the hand-annotated map in the navigation room, falls near the red mark in open terrain, not on it exactly. Close. Chapter 11. What ARC does not want you to know. One of the most consistent themes in ARC Raiders environmental storytelling is institutional opacity. ARC, as an organization, seems to have managed information carefully, and the seams in that management are visible throughout the facility. There is a document shredding log in the administrative office. This is a document that records what was shredded. The log itself covers several months and lists categories of documents by type rather than by title. One category appears for the first time in the log's final month, and then appears frequently. It is labelled Category 9. No other document in the facility defines what Category 9 is. The operational budget documents, visible in the finance corner of the administrative wing, include line items for standard facility costs. One line item appears in the final quarter's budget that has no counterpart in earlier quarters. It is labelled Research Continuation, and its cost is the largest single line item in that quarter's budget, larger than the facility's entire maintenance budget. Research Continuation appears in no other document. There is no corresponding research summary, no personnel assignment, and no output document anywhere in the facility that uses that label. The staff handbook, visible in the break room, covers standard workplace policies. It is the kind of document that is usually ignored, but its final chapter, Chapter 12, is titled Disclosure Obligations, and it is 3 times longer than any other chapter in the handbook. Its language around what constitutes a disclosure obligation is written with a specificity that suggests the institution had experience with disclosures it did not want to have. In the security office, there is a logbook for visitor access. Most entries are standard: name, purpose, escorted by. 2 entries near the back of the log are different. The purpose field for both reads inspection. The escorted by field for both has been redacted with heavy black marker. Visitor access logbooks are supposed to be unredacted for accountability purposes. The 2 redacted inspection entries are dated within the same week as the beginning of the first-person entries in the operational log, the week when something changed in how the facility was being documented. There is an ARC communications document that outlines escalation procedures for various incident types. The escalation ladder for most incident types leads ultimately to the facility director. For one incident type, labeled Class Meridian, the escalation ladder bypasses the facility director entirely and goes to an external body identified only as the coordinating group. Class Meridian is not defined in the document. The Meridian Invitational Trophy in the administrative lounge is dated to a period before the facility's construction. The word meridian in the trophy context suggests a competition or achievement. In the context of the escalation document, it suggests a category of event serious enough to bypass local authority. A sealed envelope in the outgoing mail tray of the administrative office, beyond the one addressed to the Northern Station, contains a second letter folded inside a different outer envelope. The outer envelope is addressed to the Northern Station. The inner envelope is addressed to an individual, and the address line has been left blank, suggesting the sender did not know or did not want to commit to a specific location for the recipient. The security camera archive, accessible in the security office on a terminal, has recordings organized by date. Most dates have continuous recording. One date has a gap of approximately 4 hours in the middle of what should be continuous footage. The timestamps around the gap show no anomaly in the system log. The gap itself does not appear as an error. It appears as if those 4 hours simply did not occur. There is a policy document pinned to the notice board in the operations room that outlines communication protocols during periods of reduced staffing. The document is standard, but it has a handwritten addition at the bottom, signed with initials rather than a full name, that says, "This protocol does not apply after Condition White is declared." Condition White overrides the communication protocols, which means that during whatever Condition White represents, the normal rules for who can communicate with whom and through what channels are suspended. In the supply requisition records, most requests are routine. One request, submitted near the facility's operational end period, requests materials described only as shielding components in sufficient quantity for one workspace. The request was approved. The delivery was logged. There is no record of the shielding components being installed anywhere in the facility, and they are not listed among the decommissioned equipment inventory. The inventory of personal effects collected from the facility, following its apparent abandonment, a document visible in the security office archive, lists items by room number. Room 23, the room with the missing door number plate, is not listed. Rooms 22 and 24 are both listed with their standard contents. Room 23 is simply absent from the inventory, as if it did not exist at the time the inventory was compiled. A photograph in the operations room shows a group of ARC personnel at what appears to be a formal occasion. They are arranged in standard group photo formation, but the person at the center of the front row, the position typically reserved for the most senior individual, is not looking at the camera. They are looking slightly to the left of frame, towards something outside the photograph's border. The ARC administrative documentation throughout the facility follows a consistent formatting standard. Every document that was produced after a specific date uses a slightly different header format, a subtle change in how the institutional identifier is rendered. This format change coincides with the date of the first redacted visitor inspection entry. One possible reading is that after the inspection, ARC began using a different document template. Another reading is that after the inspection, the documents were being produced by or for a different authority than before. In the research annex, there is a filing cabinet that contains hanging files. Most files contain documents. One file contains only a single index card. The index card has a question written on it. Is it receiving or is it sending? There is no answer written on the card. There is a copy of ARC's internal organizational policy document in the administrative wing. This document covers governance and reporting structures. Attached to the back of this document, paper-clipped, is a second document that is not part of the original policy. It is a single page that appears to have been written externally, not on ARC letterhead, and it describes the same governance structure in different language. The differences between the two documents are small but systematic, as if someone rewrote the policy to subtly shift where authority resided. Chapter 12. Things that should not be there. The most unsettling Easter eggs in Ark Raiders are not the ones that tell a story. They are the ones that resist explanation. Objects that have no narrative home, sounds with no apparent source, details that sit outside the logic of the world they inhabit. There is a second water tower on the far edge of the accessible map, partially obscured by terrain geometry. Unlike the first water tower, with the painted number 14, this one has no markings. It is structurally identical to the first, but has clearly never been used. Its connections to the facility's water system are present, but unattached. It was installed and then never commissioned. Inside the unused water tower, accessible by climbing the service ladder, the interior is entirely empty, except for a single handprint on the inner wall at approximately chest height, left in what appears to be a dark pigment. The handprint is of a right hand, fingers spread, positioned as if someone pressed their palm flat against the wall and held it there. In the center of the map, in open terrain that is otherwise featureless, there is a patch of ground where the grass model is absent. It is not a path or a clearing. The grass simply stops in a rough oval, approximately 3 meters across, and the ground texture beneath it is slightly different from the surrounding terrain, darker, as if something was buried or the soil was disturbed. That patch of altered ground has no interaction prompt. There is no indication on any map or document that anything is there. Its only identifying feature is that it is exactly equidistant between the two water towers. The game has a day-night cycle during the night portion of the cycle. A specific tree line on the northern approach casts shadows across the open terrain. Those shadows, during the period when the in-game moon is at maximum height, sweep across the patch of altered ground in a way that suggests the shadow source, the tree line, is not quite where the geometry says it should be. The shadow falls slightly too far east. In the residential dormitory, one of the beds has a stuffed animal on it. This is notable in a facility designed for adult workers. The stuffed animal is a rabbit, worn with age, missing one button eye. It is sitting upright against the pillow, as if placed deliberately in a comfortable position. The rabbit has a small name tag attached to its ear. The tag has a name on it, Biscuit. Biscuit is not a human name and therefore does not appear in any personnel file, but the tag is made of the same material and uses the same font as the personnel lanyards in the security checkpoint, as if whoever made the tag had access to the same label-making equipment Ark used for official identification. There is a door in the administrative wing that opens onto a stairwell. The stairwell goes up 1 floor and down 1 floor, on the floor below. It connects to the maintenance level as expected. On the floor above, it opens onto a landing with a window. The window looks out on a view that does not match the exterior geometry of the building. Based on where this stairwell is located, the view from that window should be of the courtyard. Instead, it shows an exterior wall. The exterior wall visible from the impossible window has a door in it. That door does not appear on any map of the facility's exterior. Its position, based on the window's implied viewpoint, would place it in a section of exterior wall that players can walk along during outdoor gameplay. That section of wall has no door. A set of keys hangs on a hook near the operations room. Most key sets in the facility are labelled by room or function. This set is unlabelled. There are 3 keys on the ring, 2 of the match key profiles visible on locked doors throughout the facility. The third is of a different profile entirely, smaller, with a more complex bit pattern, the kind used for security deposit boxes or specialized equipment locks. The specialized key does not match any lock visible in the accessible game world. Its presence on the ring with 2 keys that do have matches suggests it was added to an existing set rather than belonging to the same original purpose. In the recreational area there is a pool table. It is decorated with standard game setup, balls racked and cue nearby. But the rack formation is wrong. The balls are not arranged in a standard triangle rack. They are arranged in a diamond pattern with one ball in the center, removed from the diamond and set aside. The game being set up is not a standard pool game. The ball set aside from the diamond formation on the pool table is the 8 ball. In standard pool, the 8 ball belongs in the center of the rack. Setting it aside creates a setup that has no standard game rule attached to it. There is a section of the underground tunnel where the wall construction changes material for approximately 5 meters, from the concrete used throughout to something that resembles a different era of construction. Older, rougher, with a different aggregate in the mix. The change is consistent with encountering a pre-existing structure, something built before the facility that the facility was built around. That older construction section has no openings, no markings, no indication of what it is or was, but its presence inside the facility's underground infrastructure suggests the facility was built on top of something else. A bulletin board in the staff corridor has the standard mixture of notices and announcements. At the very bottom of the board, almost entirely covered by overlapping papers, is a notice that predates all the others by a significant margin based on its paper yellowing. Its full content is not readable. The visible portion at the top says, "Effective immediately, all personnel are reminded that." The rest of the notice is covered. Its effective immediately language suggests it was urgent when posted. Its position at the bottom of the board suggests it was buried over time, rather than removed and discarded. In the vehicle bay, the wall opposite the parked vehicles has a painted mural of the surrounding landscape. It is a professional mural, the kind painted as workplace decoration in industrial settings. Among the landscape features depicted in the mural is a structure that does not exist in the game's accessible terrain. It is a small building on a hillside, painted with enough detail to show a single lit window. Chapter 13. Fragments of Other Stories. Ark Raiders feels, in certain details, like a game that was built around the edges of stories it never tells directly. The Easter eggs in this section do not feel like secrets about the main facility. They feel like glimpses into other lives that intersected with this place. A personal journal near the water processing unit is written in a style different from the other journals in the game. Most journals are either operational or confessional. This one is observational. Its author describes the landscape outside the facility with care and attention, the way light falls at different hours, the way the terrain sounds in different weather. They appear to find the outside environment remarkable in a way that implies they did not expect to find it beautiful. That observational journal mentions, in one entry, a name the writer encountered on a piece of equipment. Dressler. The context suggests the writer found the name on a manufacturer's plate rather than on a person. But Dressler, the name that was erased from the briefing room whiteboard, now has a possible second origin, a company or manufacturer rather than a person. In the break room, there is a newspaper on one of the tables. Newspapers in this game are typically unreadable, decorative props with blurred text. This newspaper is also mostly blurred, but its headline is crisp enough to read. The headline is, "Local Group Wins Appeal on Land Use Designation." The article below the headline is unreadable, but the presence of a land use appeal headline in a facility context suggests the facility's construction or operation was contested. A birthday card, propped on a windowsill in the residential area, is signed by 11 people. 10 of the names are written in different handwriting, as expected of multiple signatories. The 11th signature is in the same handwriting as one of the earlier 10. Someone signed twice, perhaps using a nickname the second time. The two signatures that match are one in the middle of the card and one on the back cover. The back cover signature reads, "And me again." There is a handwritten recipe card pinned to a corkboard in the food storage area. It is a recipe for a specific dish written with personal annotations about preferred variations and family adjustments. The recipe itself is for a dish with cultural associations that point toward the same regional tradition as the lullaby the musical box would play. These details, scattered widely across the facility, suggest a coherent background for one of the facility's original staff members. In the maintenance tunnels, there is a stretch of wall where multiple people have carved their names or initials over time. This is common in long-term institutional settings. The names range from casual to careful in their execution. One name is carved in a way that suggests the carver took significantly more time than the others. The letters are even, the depth consistent, the spacing measured. It reads, Vasquez was here and will be again. The future tense in that carving stands out. Most carved declarations are present tense assertions. The future tense implies expectation of return. Whether the return happened is a separate question. A travel guidebook has been left in the common room. It covers a region distant from the facility's apparent location. Several pages have been dog-eared and certain passages circled or underlined. The underlined passages all describe locations with specific natural features: bodies of water, cave systems, elevated vantage points. The pattern of selections suggests someone planning a route through terrain that could be traversed on foot, without roads. There are children's shoes in the daycare area, small, sitting neatly beside a low table. They are paired and positioned, as if recently removed, as if the child who wore them stepped out of them to run somewhere and has not come back yet to put them on again. A photograph in the dormitory corridor shows two people at what appears to be a graduation ceremony. They are both in formal academic attire. The photograph is labelled on the back with two names and a year. The year is notable because it precedes the facility's construction, meaning these people graduated together before any of this existed. They presumably made a path that led them here from that moment. One of the names on the photograph's back is the same as one of the names on the 7 only in memorial list from the lounge tribute board. There is a half-finished letter in the personal effects of one of the dormitory rooms. It is addressed to someone referred to as Mum. The letter describes the job in broad terms that are careful not to be specific. The writer calls the work important and says they cannot say more than that. The letter stops in the middle of a paragraph about the food being better than expected. It was never finished. It was never sent. In the office of whoever served as the facility's medical officer, there is a shelf of textbooks. They are medical reference texts, appropriate to the setting. One of them is not a medical text. It is a book on archaeology, specifically on the archaeology of underground structures and buried settlements. It is the only book on the shelf that appears to have been read, based on the wear on its spine and the slight fanning of its pages. The medical officer, reading about underground archaeology in a facility that was built over an older construction, suggests that whoever held that position was aware of the older structure and was researching it independently of their official duties. There is a pair of glasses in the break room, folded on the table beside a chair, as if someone stepped away briefly and left them behind. Prescription glasses are difficult to work without. The fact that they were left suggests either the person left in a hurry, or they had a second pair, or they left for good, and these were a deliberate leaving behind. Near the communications hub there is a wall-mounted display of commendations and achievements, the kind of motivational installation common in institutional settings. All of the commendations are for work performance. One is for something described as exceptional contribution under difficult conditions. The date on it falls within the window of the first-person log entries. Whatever those difficult conditions were, someone was formally recognized for how they handled them. Chapter 14. Signal and Noise. The communications infrastructure of arc raiders is among its most detail-rich areas. The game uses signal, transmission, and reception as both literal mechanics and as a metaphorical undercurrent throughout its world-building. These Easter eggs sit at that intersection. The communications tower has 40 frequency positions on its selector. 39 produce either static or operational tones. Position 33 produces the calibration reference tone, but there is a 40th position that most players never reach because the dial appears to stop at 39. The 40th position is accessible only if you move the dial past what feels like a natural stop. It produces silence. Clean, complete silence that is distinct from static, in a way that is immediately perceptible. That silence at position 40 is not the absence of signal. It is too clean for absence. In audio engineering, that kind of silence indicates a signal that has been precisely nulled, cancelled out by an equal and opposite signal. Something is being actively suppressed at that frequency. The relay stations, scattered across the outer terrain, each have a signal meter. The meters show varying levels of activity, as expected for operational equipment. One relay station, the northernmost one, has a signal meter that reads differently from the others. Its meter oscillates rather than holding steady, swinging slowly between low and high as if tracking something that is itself moving. The oscillating signal at the northernmost relay does not correspond to any weather or terrain feature that would naturally produce a moving signal source. A stationary signal produces a steady reading. An oscillating reading points towards something in motion. There is a signal log in the operations room that records transmissions by frequency and time. The log is comprehensive and routine, except for one entry that is formatted differently from all the others. Standard entries have a frequency, a time, a duration, and a source identifier. This one entry has no source identifier. Its duration is listed as ongoing. Its frequency is the one that falls between positions 33 and 34 on the tower dial. The frequency with an ongoing transmission and no identified source is the one that cannot be manually tuned to on the tower. Something is transmitting on a frequency that the facility's equipment was not set up to directly access. In the communications equipment room, there is a device that resembles a spectrum analyzer. It displays frequency ranges as visual peaks and valleys. Most of the display shows expected signals, but in one narrow band, there is a persistent, unmoving peak that does not correspond to any facility system or external broadcast. The peak is small but consistent. It has been there long enough that the display screen has a slightly more worn area directly in front of it, as if someone stood and looked at that specific spot repeatedly. A technical notebook in the communications hub describes a phenomenon the author calls ambient coherence. The author is working through a theory that certain spaces accumulate ambient electromagnetic energy in ways that can appear ordered rather than random. The notebook is rigorous in its early pages and becomes more speculative toward the end. The final page is a single sentence. The eastern section is not a coincidence. There is a radio transceiver in the monitoring station that is not part of ARC's standard equipment inventory. It is older, from a different manufacturer, and its frequency range overlaps with ARC's equipment only partially. Its presence suggests it was brought in personally rather than requisitioned. Its frequency range covers the band where the unidentified ongoing transmission is logged. The personal transceiver has a notepad beside it with a series of timestamps. The timestamps appear to record when the ongoing transmission was monitored. The final timestamp in the notepad is approximately 3 weeks before the date of the last first-person operational log entry. 3 weeks of monitoring, then silence. The log entries continue for 3 more weeks before going silent too. A set of antenna diagrams in the engineering bay shows planned installations for the facility. The diagrams account for all the antennas currently visible on the facility's exterior, but one diagram in the set shows an antenna type that was never installed, a directive antenna designed to both transmit and receive with high precision. At a specific bearing, the bearing shown on the diagram points northeast. Northeast of the facility, in open terrain, is where the hand-annotated map marks the red point, with no visible content. In the basement-level communications relay room, there is an amplifier unit with a gain setting that has been manually adjusted. Most equipment gain settings are factory set and sealed. This one has had its seal broken, its access panel opened, and its internal gain dial turned to a setting far above the standard operational range. The setting is not marked as a dangerous level. It is marked as a monitoring level, the kind of setting used when trying to hear something faint. Someone turned up the gain on that amplifier to listen harder to something quiet. There are signal boosters throughout the facility that extend ARC's internal communication range. One of them has been rewired. The rewiring does not disable the booster's standard function. It adds a secondary function, routing a portion of the received signal to a separate output. That output leads to a wire that runs along the baseboard of the corridor and terminates inside the wall at a point adjacent to the room marked on no map. The sub-basement room with the switch inside it. Chapter 15. The East Section. This chapter focuses entirely on the eastern section of the facility, because it has warranted its own examination. The technical notebook's observation that the eastern section is not a coincidence holds up under close scrutiny. More unexplained details are concentrated here than anywhere else in the game. The eastern wall of the facility, from the outside, looks identical to the other walls. Same construction, same condition. But the interior walls that form the eastern section's boundary are thicker than the walls elsewhere. The difference is not dramatic, but it is consistent across the entire eastern perimeter. The extra thickness was built in, not added later. The eastern section has its own independent electrical circuit. This is visible from the breaker panels in the basement. Every other section shares circuits with adjacent areas. The eastern section's breakers are isolated, a separate sub-panel. It can be powered down or powered up independently of the rest of the facility. The air quality sensors in the eastern section, visible on a monitoring panel in the operations room, show readings that differ from the rest of the facility, not by dangerous amounts, but consistently. The eastern section reads slightly differently on two specific parameters: air pressure and electromagnetic background level. Both are marginally higher. A higher air pressure in a sealed section suggests either a different HVAC balance or deliberate positive pressure design. Positive pressure environments are used in clean rooms, in medical isolation settings, and in spaces where the goal is to prevent outside contamination from entering. The eastern section appears to have been designed to keep something in as much as to keep things out. The CCTV coverage in the eastern section is denser than elsewhere. There are more cameras per square meter in the eastern section than anywhere else in the facility. Most areas have cameras at corridors and entry points. The eastern section has cameras that cover the interior of rooms as well. The camera coverage is designed to observe what happens inside the spaces, not just who enters and exits. In the eastern section's main corridor, the floor has a different material underlay that produces a subtly different acoustic quality. The resonance is lower, as if the floor is over something denser or deeper than the standard construction elsewhere. The difference is perceptible when listening carefully to footstep echoes, but would pass unnoticed under normal conditions. The sealed door in the eastern underground section, the one without returning boot prints, has a status indicator light above it. The indicator light protocol throughout the facility is standard: green for clear access, red for locked, amber for in use or restricted. The light above this door is amber. Amber means in use or restricted, not locked, not decommissioned, in use. The examination table with the urgently released restraints is in the eastern infirmary bay, which is part of the eastern section. The infirmary bay has a secondary entrance that connects to the eastern section's main corridor, rather than to the general infirmary. A patient or subject brought in through the main infirmary entrance would use the primary exit. The secondary entrance suggests a pathway that avoids the general facility. The eastern monitoring post with the dead radio channel that has a breathing rhythm is in the eastern section. The personal transceiver with the monitoring timestamps is in the eastern monitoring post. The timestamps begin approximately 2 months after the facility's operational logs begin, which suggests the monitoring started shortly after something was established in the eastern section. The frequency response material described in the research document, the one whose response is unexpectedly stronger near the eastern section, is not a communications material. Based on the technical language in the document, it is closer to a structural material, something used in construction. A structural material that responds more strongly near the eastern section suggests the eastern section's construction includes something that generates or amplifies the relevant frequency. The modified arc symbol with the horizontal line struck through it appears on the eastern section's sealed door. It also appears on the crate marked for disposal in the eastern storage area, and it appears on the forehead of the mural figure. In the recreational area, the mural figure, as noted earlier, wears shoes matching the photograph in the planning room, the photograph with the 2 overlapping diamonds on the back. The two overlapping diamonds appear on the eastern section's secondary storage unit blast door. The secondary storage unit is in the eastern section. The people depicted in the photograph, identifiable only by their lower legs and feet, were associated with this storage unit. At a specific hour of the in-game day cycle, when the antenna tower shadow aligns with the water processing unit marker, the shadow's direction is oriented toward the eastern section. The alignment is not incidental. If the antenna tower shadow were being used as a clock or a pointer, at that specific moment it points east. The cairn, in the lower level entryway, 3 stacked rocks on a ledge, is positioned at the threshold of the corridor that leads toward the eastern section's underground access. Of all the possible locations for a cairn in the facility, this threshold is notable for being the last point before the flooded corridor that blocks straightforward access to the eastern underground. The boot prints go through the flood and stop at the amber-lit sealed door. They do not return. Chapter 16. The Ones Who Left. The evidence throughout Ark Raiders suggests that many of the people who worked in this facility departed at different times and under different circumstances. Some left in an organized way, some did not, and some may not have left at all. The following Easter eggs concern departure in all its forms. There is a departure log in the security office, separate from the personnel roster. It records authorized exits from the facility. The log covers a span of several months and shows a gradual pattern. Early in the log, exits are evenly distributed throughout the week and day. Later, exits cluster at unusual hours, early morning, late night. The final week of the log shows exits happening consecutively, several per day. Then nothing. The nothing after the final cluster of exits in the departure log is not a new page waiting to be filled. The log continues with blank lines, numbered and formatted, but empty, as if the logging person expected more departures and prepared for them, but they did not come. In the parking area adjacent to the loading dock, there are vehicle spaces. Most are empty. 3 vehicles remain. The vehicles have been assessed by players who note that one of them has a full tank based on its visible gauge. One has a child seat installed in the rear. The vehicle with the child seat also has a parking pass on its dash. The parking pass has a name. The name on the parking pass is the same as the name on the label in the daycare area beside the empty photo space. Mira. Mira's vehicle is still in the lot. Mira's photo is gone from the board. These 2 facts point in opposite directions as evidence and do not resolve cleanly. There is a bulletin board near the main entrance titled Current Status that apparently tracked which staff members were on-site versus off-site at any given time. The board uses a peg system, names on one side and status pegs on the other. Most pegs have been removed, but the names are still there on their labels. One name has its peg still in the on-site position. The name is partially obscured by a folded paper that was pinned over it. The peg behind the paper reads as present. A personal letter in the administrative wing, unsent, is addressed to someone at an external institution. The letter explains that the writer is tendering their resignation effective immediately. The word immediately is underlined. The letter then continues with 3 paragraphs explaining why, but those paragraphs have been crossed out completely. The letter ends after the resignation declaration with a handwritten note. Actually, that's all. That's all you need. Near the main exit, there are hooks for outerwear. Several coats remain on hooks. They are work coats, facility issue, personal coats. The kind worn for external weather are not visible on these hooks. Most people who departed this facility, whenever they did so, took their personal outerwear. Work coats are replaceable. Personal coats are not. The supply manifest for the week of the final departure log entries shows a requisition for a significantly above average quantity of portable lighting equipment, batteries, and water purification materials. These are materials consistent with extended, independent operation outside of facility infrastructure. The manifest was filled and signed out. The items were taken. In the dormitory, the cot that was perfectly made, the one with the compass-bearing notebook under the pillow, is in a room where every other cot shows signs of extended use. This one cot so precisely made, reads less like someone preparing to leave and more like someone preparing for someone to arrive. It was made for a guest. There is a note tucked into the frame of the eastern section's corridor camera, visible only when you look at the camera itself rather than at the corridor it monitors. The note is small and folded. Its text reads, "For anyone watching this later, we didn't leave because we wanted to." The phrasing "we didn't leave because we wanted to" could be read as clarification that departure was necessary or forced. It could also be read as something else entirely. In the waste disposal area, among the items set aside from regular disposal, there is a folded ARC administrative folder. Inside the folder is a single document, a transfer authorization for a personnel relocation. The transferred party's name is redacted. The destination is redacted. The date is readable. The authorization signature is readable. The signature matches in style the same hand as the "Do Not Open" note on the junction box in the second level of the industrial wing. The person who wrote "Do Not Open" on a junction box also signed a transfer authorization for an unnamed person to an unnamed location. Whether the two documents are related by circumstance or are entirely separate events is unresolvable, but they share a signature. Chapter 17: Things That Changed. Arc Raiders contains evidence of change layered into its environments. Paint applied over earlier paint. Equipment replaced at different times. Policies amended. Schedules adjusted. Tracking these changes reveals a timeline that differs from what the facility's official documents describe. The institutional paint color used on the walls throughout the facility is a specific shade of grey-green. In several rooms, the baseboards show a previous paint color beneath the current one, a warmer beige. The repainting appears to have happened throughout the facility at approximately the same time, based on how uniformly the layer depths match. A facility-wide repaint at a single moment suggests a rebranding, a change in institutional identity, or a deliberate effort to change the feel of the space. The ARC signage throughout the facility uses a specific logo design. A small number of signs, mostly in the older construction areas and the lower basement, use a slightly different version of the logo. The differences are subtle, slightly different proportions, a slightly different style in the secondary element. The older logo suggests ARC's branding was updated at some point, and the older areas were not fully transitioned. The dormitory room number plates use one screw type. The bathroom and utility room number plates use a different screw type. The difference is small enough to be invisible unless you are looking at both in quick succession. The implication is that the rooms were numbered at different times, which in turn suggests the space was redesigned or reassigned at some point during its operational life. The cafeteria furniture is a mix of two distinct equipment sets. One set has rounded edges and a specific leg design. The other has squared edges and a different leg profile. The two sets do not match, but are intermixed throughout the cafeteria, as if they were merged from two separate inventories. One possible reading is that when a second population of staff joined the facility, they brought their own furniture with them. In the communications hub, two different cable management systems are in use. The original installation used a clip and channel system fixed to the wall. A later installation used cable ties threaded through drilled holes. Both systems are visible running parallel in some sections. The later installation is denser and appears to have been added during an expansion of communications capacity. The security checkpoint has two generations of access control equipment. The outer checkpoint uses an older card reader design. The inner checkpoint uses a newer biometric reader. The upgrade was not facility-wide, suggesting it was applied specifically to the inner checkpoint in response to a perceived security need that the outer checkpoint was not meeting. There is evidence of two different emergency preparedness eras in the facility. The older fire safety equipment uses a visual design standard that differs from the newer equipment. Both are present, which means the facility was never fully upgraded. Either budget constraints or time prevented the completion of the transition. The break room coffee machine is a newer model than the one shown in the facility's equipment purchase records, which are visible in the administrative files. The records show the original purchase, but no record of replacement. Either the replacement was handled outside normal procurement, or the records are incomplete. A stretch of outdoor perimeter fencing uses two different post designs, alternating between an older round post and a newer square post. Fencing is usually replaced in sections. This alternating pattern suggests the posts were replaced individually over time, rather than all at once, each new post filling in where an old one failed. The floor plan of the residential area shows rooms of a standard configuration, but the physical walls in one corner of the residential block do not match the floor plan. A room that the floor plan shows as two separate spaces is actually one combined room. The dividing wall shown on the plan was never built or was removed. The floor shows no evidence of a wall having been there, suggesting it was never built. The equipment in the eastern monitoring post includes both old and new generation communications hardware. The new hardware is clearly the operational equipment. The old hardware has not been decommissioned, but has been pushed to the back of the room and unplugged. Among the unplugged old hardware is the personal transceiver with the monitoring timestamps. The monitoring of the unidentified ongoing transmission began with old hardware. At some point, the monitoring either moved to the new hardware or it stopped. The timestamps end before the new hardware appears to have been installed, based on manufacturing codes visible on the new equipment's cases. The whiteboard diagram of the looping org chart found behind the shelving unit in the secondary maintenance room shows a diagram drawn in two colors. The initial diagram is in blue. Additions and modifications to it are in red. The red additions significantly change the structure, collapsing some nodes and adding new connections. Whatever the org chart describes, it was rethought substantially at some point. In the operations room, the primary planning calendar on the wall shows a standard work schedule. Several weeks in are crossed out entirely, day by day. After the crossed out weeks, the calendar continues in a different handwriting than the original schedule entries. The new handwriting is less regular, faster, as if the person writing it was doing it under different conditions. Chapter 18. The Last Details. This final chapter covers the Easter eggs that resist categorization, that sit outside the organized systems this video has tried to build around them. These are the details that simply are what they are. In the very first room most players enter in Ark Raiders, there is an object on the floor partially behind the door that is easy to miss because the door itself obscures it on opening. It is a single key, not on a ring, lying flat on the floor. It matches the profile of a standard facility door key. The door it belongs to, based on the key's serial code, is the room that would be 23. The first room and the missing room are connected by a single lost key. The room that does not exist in the inventory has its key in the very first place you ever stand. There is a final entry in the observational journal near the water processing unit. This journal, as described earlier, records the outside environment with care and attention across many entries. Its final entry is different from all the previous ones. It does not describe the outside, it describes the inside, a single room, a chair in that room, and a lamp. The lamp is on. The writer of the observational journal sat in the sub-basement room with the switch inside it and wrote their last entry. The lamp is on because someone turned it on from inside, and the journal's survival in the facility suggests the writer did not take it when they left, or did not leave. There is a maintenance record on the junction box in the eastern section's secondary corridor. The record lists several services performed on the box across several years. The most recent service entry is not a maintenance action. It reads, "Checked, nothing changed." The notation is not in the maintenance record format. It was added informally, by hand, in the margin. In the area above the main entrance, accessible through the roof path, there is a wind vane that tracks the prevailing wind direction. Wind vanes in games are usually static props. This one moves. It tracks the wind correctly during the outdoor day portions of the game, but during the night cycle, when the wind should logically continue, the wind vane stops moving. It holds fixed at the bearing that points toward the eastern section. That bearing is the same one the binoculars in the crane cab are aimed at. The same one the compass in the hidden locker shelf indicates, the same one the dormitory notebook records, the same direction the annotated terrain map marks with an unexplained red dot. Everything that points east. The lamp in the sub-basement room is still on. There is a moment in the communications hub, if you stand completely still for an extended period, when the ambient audio drops to near silence. This does not happen in many locations. Ambient audio in this game maintains a consistent level. In the hub, if you remain entirely still for approximately 4 minutes, the layers of sound peel back one by one until what remains is a single, barely audible tone. The tone is not a calibration frequency. It is not a beacon tone. It is close to a frequency associated with extremely low electromagnetic field, oscillation, the kind produced not by equipment, but by large geological features. The facility was built on something. The underground construction is older than Ark. The eastern section's walls are thicker. The air pressure is higher. The signal that cannot be tuned to is ongoing. The lamp is on from inside. The wind vane holds east at night. In the daycare area, the final drawing in the sequence is the one with the most empty space. A figure stands in an open area. No building around them. The building is gone from the picture. The figure has their arms slightly raised, not in alarm, but in something that reads more like acknowledgement. Below the figure, in the child's handwriting, a single word, hello.